Okay, brilliant. If you'd like to make a start, Ernest.
Wonderful. Welcome back, everybody, from the Pacific Talanoa. I hope you've all enjoyed the sessions that you've all respectively been a part of, and have had an opportunity to have some meaningful discussions with other Pacific Island youth from across the region. I know it's going to be a little bit different because we've been doing this solely through a technological interface, but I think this has been one of the beauties of the last year, has been an opportunity to find ways of interacting and connecting with each other outside of physical interaction. So I know that we have about half an hour for this next segment, and this will be an opportunity for some of the ideas and sharings that took place over the last 60 minutes to really be fleshed out and shared with the rest of the group. I know that everybody's had an opportunity to hear from a single group, but this is an opportunity for us to be able to share some of the richness that came out in the other groups that we weren't able to be part of. We'll start with pillar 2. So I'll hand over to you, Chofi, and you can take us through some of the discussions that you've had. If I could ask that we focus on some of the key points that were shared, as well as some of the key suggested action items that have come out. Over to you, Chofi.
Thank you so much, Ernest. Just an indication from the audience. Can people hear me well?
Yes, that sounds fine.
Thank you. We started off with a bit of technical glitch from our end, but as Ernest has mentioned, it's the beauty of this having this virtual. It's also a learning experience for some of us. In the inclusion, during the inclusion breakout session, we had some very interesting discussions. And the 3 key questions that was put out to the participants were in the areas around inclusion, gender, people of diverse SOGIES, people with disabilities, children and youth, in their engagement in a locally led resilience system. 3 questions were posed out around the areas around where are we at the moment, what is the current situation, and what are we currently happening, especially reflecting back from 2019, the outcome statement that was shared earlier by Vivian. Where are we now, especially, and also in the work around achieving the goals of the FRDP. The second questions, we had a lot of conversation around where do we want to go? How do we see ourselves as Pacific in the achievement of this of the FRDP, especially around the areas around inclusion, and how do we get there as well? Understand in bringing everyone in the table. There was discussion around anti-tokenism, where people are just doing a tick on the box just for the sake of their funders. There were also conversation around not getting the real people who are supposed to be sitting at the table. We're not talking around the areas around inclusion. We're talking about considerations. We're talking about gender inclusion and around assessments, activities. There was also around financial resources, resourcing of personnel. But there was also a conversations around power and privileges as well, which I thought was very interesting because as climate activists, as young people, as advocates on disaster risk reduction and climate change, we're in the forefront of doing awareness around with communities. But how do we ensure that comes into play? Our power and privileges are put on the table, and we are putting people at the center of our work as well. I guess that is what, and overall, just wanted to sum up was conversation around getting everyone on the table. It needs to be an intersectional response when we're working in the areas around disaster risk reduction and climate change. There was just those are something that I picked up from our conversation, and I guess because of the technical glitches as well, we were unable to have furthermore conversation around that. Thank you.
Thanks for that great summary, Jofi. I think it's wonderful, and I completely appreciate your comments about some of the technical glitches. They happen all the time. It's okay. We just find ways of persevering through these things. But I think maybe one thing really important to remember is that was only an hour-long session. The conversation doesn't end here; it continues. And as you saw in Sevu's presentation in the beginning, where we had an outcome statement that was drawn up in 2019, but the work continued all the way up until now, and it will continue in days, weeks, and months to come. So if you didn't get everything out in this 60 minutes, there's way more time to be able to continue your contribution. Without further ado, we'll move over to the group that was discussing Pillar 3. So I'll now hand it over to Salote Nasolo. So whenever you're ready, Salote, come in and share some of the key points, answering those 3 questions.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Well, for me, the questions, even though it was done in separate accounts, they all answered all one go. It was all bombarded, so I really felt sorry for my repertoire, but he did a very good job. And then he gave it back to me to report. So question 1, where are we? There were 4 answers from Tuvalu, from the hub in Tuvalu, from Patricia and Fipe. Tuvalu mentioned that COVID has been a blessing in disguise, and we now know the gaps in comms and advocacy and dissemination of information to communities, and addressing these gaps by building a youth hub where it can be where it can be accessed by the youth from around the region, and we can share traditional knowledge, and for government agencies, where government agencies can share the information to the younger people and even upcoming youth advocates. This is somewhere where they can come and then see what needs to be done, or how can they go about doing things as advocates. Patricia Malam has shared that there seems to be a lot of noise and information competing for space in the context of disaster-based reductions due to COVID-19 pandemic. And climate change seems to have taken a backseat in terms of the mainstream media and coverage, but that doesn't mean amazing things aren't happening. But there's an opportunity to tap back to organizations like SPRAP, SPC, PCC as a regional space to store documented traditional knowledge and success lessons learned. In terms of traditional knowledge, social systems, in terms of communications, now how it can be contextualized, so it's useful to youth and communities. Fipe has said that she supports what the Tuvalu Hub have mentioned, and the hub, the exchange of information to all the Pacific region, to identify focal point and to ensure information is available to everybody and from the hub as the source of information, and also to happening in communities engagement with organizations, information not readily available to youth on these initiatives. And a youth hub would also be useful in sharing information for the youths from all around the Pacific region. Mr. Raven has suggested that data can be better supported in terms of gaps for individuals, researchers that will need to do research in their master's or their PhD. This hub can be a source of information on how they can fill in the gaps and better the specific knowledge in terms of traditional knowledge and also communication. Lemao, who's an advocate, who's also working with the Red Cross, I believe. She has mentioned the importance of the role of youth in informing decisions in disaster prepared and resilience. COVID has taught the youth that we have the tools in space, awareness programs, and designing awareness material for communities. For example, this virtual platform, and hubs to formal and a switch off for youth. So integration of information of informal and formal tool, so young people can also share and get information. So youth can use tools like one of the disabled youth have actually created TikTok account to advocate on climate change, and so it can even social media platforms can be used as advocate platforms to inform and to really advocate about climate change. And another challenge with data management is young people dealing with information. Youth or fresh grad thrown into the deep without proper training and comms people, and they lack the technical knowledge. And not everyone is familiar with technology and how to go about these IT services. So that's another downside to the third pillar, which is inform. And the youth need proper mentorship to understand the technical, so that the technical information can be translated to communities that's understandable. And even at grassroots level, using some technical terms can be really challenging for them. So it needs to really come down to community level to make this communication and technology more accessible. So platforms need to be more friendly, user-friendly for youth, for young people, and to the old, and to translate data into understandable information. Social media platforms can be used by the young people to share and receive information. For example, apps that can be designed in such a way to assist these platforms and to collect information on weather and disaster preparedness. And lastly, Mr. Simeone have highlighted this connectivity, transitioning information from senior to the younger population. So traditional knowledge has worked well for the elders, but as you can see, the index of climate change is very obvious, and traditional knowledge is something that the younger generation has slowly faded, and it's not welcomed as it was to the older generation. And he has highlighted that our ancestors have adapted to these climate changes. And there's a great need on how we can document these stories behind food security, sustainable shelter, sustainable wash for people at community level, etc., and how we can take formal education information to the communities and grassroots people. More youths moving up to urban areas and missing our traditional stories. And lastly, how we can document these traditional stories and sharing and integrating it to the educational system. For instance, the typical example we came up with was since the Pacific Island is at the forefront of climate change, what can we do to implement the importance of climate change? So we can include climate change as a subject from primary level up to secondary and even a degree, because if we want to study climate change, you can study it at postgraduate level. So there's a huge gap that needs to be filled. So we need to integrate and come up with climate change from a very young, included into the academic from primary school, secondary school, and at degree level, not just postgraduate level. That's it from my end. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. That was, you say that's it, but that was a significant amount of information that you were able to do and discussion that you could do in a 60-minute time frame. So that's fantastic. I'll pull out one really important point that you've made, and it's around how it's not that there's a lack of knowledge or that there's a lack of drive and ambition to ensure that we can meet the DRR and climate change targets. It's actually that there's what's missing is an opportunity to kind of join the dots between these different things and ensure that the communication lines remain open and ensure that we can have communication, information, and data analysis taking place in a way that is accessible and as inclusive as possible. And that's something that's missing. So it's really, how do we harness the strength that we already have and ensure that it becomes accessible and widespread and mainstreamed. We'll now move on to the reporting back from Pillar 4. Sharon, if you're ready, please go ahead and report back on the fruitful discussion that you've all had.
Hi, Ernest. Thank you, everyone. And I must say that our discussion, we had quite a long time with technical issues. So I'm apologies for that if those who have joined earlier and then they left the group. And in terms of Pillar 4, our discussion is, what I'm going to share today is mainly on the online discussion, not from the hub. So I hope there is more discussion in our national hubs, because not much have been shared for this pillar online. But some of the points that were raised today is around the first question, but I'll just combine all of them together. So some of the key points are like the current situation. Now our discussion on this pillar was more around COVID. So how COVID has affected people to go back to their own places and, you know, use a lot of transportation in order to get back to their homes. And in some way that has also contributed to their carbon footprint. But also there were also experiences shared around some of the activities that are currently happening in terms of nature-based solutions activity, such as, you know, youth engaging in mangrove planting and youth also engaging in tree plantings around the region. And I think the experience that was shared today was from Fiji, but I'm sure those were similar across some of the main island countries, that people are engaging in those different activities in terms of addressing our carbon, trying to contribute to in terms of the mitigation, but also adaptation aspect in terms of climate change. And where do we want to see, where do we want to go and how we're going to do that? There are also points around the strength of the youth in terms of, you know, the collective actions that everyone can do together in terms of, you know, continue to be advocating for low carbon emissions throughout, you know, not only the region, but at the global level. And also the other point that was also shared was around how we could, you know, invest in activities that youth can carry on in terms of funding, like funding activities such as, you know, tree planting, like engaging in ecosystem-based adaptation activities, but in terms of funding aspect of it. So that was also raised from one of the points in terms of how we could, you know, go from here, from what is currently happening, and, you know, go on to the next, you know, continue on with the work. So that was also raised in the discussion. And I guess that's all from our team. Not much have been discussed, but I'm sure there's been more discussions around the other pillars that are all interrelated together. So over to you. Thank you, Ernest. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sharon. And I think the last point you made is also extremely important, that although we had these discussions all separately and everybody had the opportunity to share individually, actually all four of these pillars are integrated and require a level of mainstreaming across in a cross-sectional manner. And so some things that were discussed in pillar 1 are really important in pillar 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. So it's just finding ways of ensuring that we're not operating as individual pillars, but actually kind of the 4 cornerstones of resilience. So finally, we'll move over to Sevu, who will present on pillar 1. So we don't do things normally here. We've decided to change up the order a little bit. We'll start with, now move on to Sevu, who will present the notes from pillar 1. Over to you, Sevu.
Thank you.
Sevu? Hello?
Yes.
Sevu, it's Anna Maria, reporter from session 1.
Thank you, Anna. Please go ahead. This is session 1. We were just waiting for you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, apologies to everyone for there's a technical difficulty from my end. For session 1, integrate, we had an insightful discussion. I also managed to note down some in-depth discussions from the participants. First of all, there were mainly on the views were mainly driven by youth involvement in climate change and resilience. From Palau, Pohnpei in Palau, The team have implemented activities in climate change adaptation towards resilience. Primarily, they've started in public school, I believe. And also they are trying to involve more youths in these activities. Also managed to note down someone from the private sector. They're mainly to mainstream climate change adaptation towards resilience in the Pacific, especially at the regional level. They've started through informative sessions and hoping it is featured firmly in the private sector regionally. And moving on for where do we want to go? Making great efforts in integrating young people, youth being the elements of change, as mentioned by Henry Puna. And collaborations is key and is a wider in a wider inclusion towards climate change adaptation and resilience in the Pacific. Also reviewing current national policies and strengthen them through inclusion and integration, Vinaka.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna Maria, for that report back of Pillar 1. So we've now had the opportunity to hear from some of the key points, asking the 3 questions that everybody was asked about, kind of assessing the situation of where we are in terms of the pillar that we were all asked to discuss. What's the ideal situation? Where are we trying to end up? And then the 3rd question of really mapping out what it is that we can do to bridge the gap between where we are and where we'd like to be. And that step is really crucial. And I think that our 4 pillars have had an opportunity to, at the very least, kickstart that discussion and find ways of ensuring that over the next few days, but also going forward to the rest of the working year and in time to come, we have an opportunity to really kick into action some of the plans we've made. I'd now like to pass it over to Epeli to deliver a vote of thanks. Over to you, Epeli.
Thank you, Ernest. And Bula Binaka, everyone. My name is Epeli Lesuma, and I am joining you from Fiji, now on lockdown or semi-lockdown with restrictions in place because of COVID. Wherever you are joining from this afternoon, please put your hands together for yourselves. So please clap and acknowledge the fact that you have survived the first, I guess, pre-PRM virtual youth forum. And I know that a number of us had technical challenges along the way, but I would like to make a special acknowledgement of those of you that displayed great resilience to stay on and hang in there and contribute despite the challenges of internet connectivity, access to technology, and being able to understand and unpack some of the more complex elements of today's discussions. I've been tasked to deliver today's vote of thanks, and I would firstly just like to make a special acknowledgement of the organizations that have brought us all together and our organizing committee for this youth forum, you know, and naming just a few key people in particular, Sehu from the IFRC, Vivian, Ernest, who is a great moderator for today's youth forum, and countless others that made this possible. In more normal circumstances, I would be delivering this vote of thanks to you in person, and we would all be meeting together and then departing for a hearty paid for lunch or afternoon tea. But this is the new normal for us. And so thank you for the work that was put in to weave all of this together. I'd also like to make a special acknowledgement as well for the technical team that supported us and this virtual forum, Katie and Luke in particular, who helped pull all of us together for the Zoom sessions and the platforms. Your contributions to this forum are much appreciated and acknowledged as well. I'd like to just leave with one maybe final comment, which really stood out for me from the Honorable Henry Puna's speech this morning. And he referred to youth as the lightning rods for change. In Fiji at the moment, the weather is quite stormy and windy, and so hopefully we won't have any lightning storms. But for those of you that are joining this call virtually, each of you are lightning rods for change in your various countries. And so I hope going into the PRM, you'll be able to strike and share useful insights towards the PRM and the framework for resilient development and the discussions that we're going to have moving forward. Be encouraged, be inspired, and continue to be resilient despite the challenges that we're facing as well with technology and COVID. On behalf of everyone and all our participants and organizers, Vinaka Vakalevu, and thank you for joining today.
Thanks so much, Ipeli, for that wonderful vote of thanks. And I think it really rounded everything off lovely. I, for one, am extremely grateful to have been part of this this youth forum. I think it's a new and challenging experience for all of us, but I have really had an amazing time being able to listen to some of the insights from Pacific Island young people and supporters of young people from the region. It's been absolutely fantastic. I think the thing that I'm extremely grateful for is because I'm taking this call from home, that my siblings took a break from their sort of daily karaoke singing of Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey hits, which has been an absolute blessing, so I could take this call. I think also an enormous shout out needs to go to our interpreters who have made this session a lot more inclusive to ensure that we can really have the fullness of participation of everybody across this region. I think we're still a long way from ensuring that we've mainstreamed inclusiveness into some of our online consultations, but this has definitely been a great start. After this, we'll be having a sort of a 15 to 20 minute break. And at the top of the hour, we'll be having the Youth Learning Lab, which will be conducted in partnership with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. So I hope that we can all reconvene at 3 p.m. Fiji time for the Youth Learning Lab. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So once again, a big Vinaka Vakalevu to everybody, and thanks for kind of bearing with my poor internet connection and my slightly monotonous voice, and I've thoroughly enjoyed being here. All the best for the rest of the Pacific Resilience meeting. More.
There's something I would like to talk about. Our relationship with nature is broken, but relationships can change. The climate crisis, ecological crisis, and health crisis, they are all interlinked. We no longer see the links between them. We only see this far. So what will we do? My name is Greta Thunberg, and I would like to connect the dots. Because let's face it, if we don't change, we are f***ed. Millions have died from COVID-19. Zika, Ebola, West Nile fever, SARS, MERS. Up to 75% of all new diseases come from other animals. Because of the way we farm and treat nature, cutting down forests and destroying habitats, we are creating the perfect conditions for diseases to spill over from one animal to another and to us. The next pandemic could be much, much worse. But we can change. It is heartbreaking to know all this, but it is also our opportunity. We know what we can do. We can change the way we farm. We can change what we eat. We can change how we treat nature. Some of us have lots of choices, while some have none at all. Those with the most power have the most responsibility, and most of us can do something. So, what will you do?